Welcome to gearvlogz, the update show. UAW Strike, day 37. But before we get into the story, I'd like to ask you to head on over to gearvlogz.com and check out our donation page. Let me pull that up. Where you can help support, fund a trip to SEMA 2019, to where I can cover the coverage of for the whole week from Monday, November 4th through Friday evening, November 9th, including the SEMA Cruise and SEMA Ignited show on Friday night, along with lots of interviews I have lined up. So if you can want to help support this channel, please head on over to gearvlogz.com, donate, and hit that donation button. Any funds that you could donate is greatly appreciated. Whatnot. So let's get into the story. First story we have here is federal corruption probe strike looms over the UAW's voting on proposed labor contract. Major key points are members' approval of leadership approval deal has traditionally been a sure thing, but not any longer. Fiat Chrysler workers 4 years ago voted down an initial contract and sent negotiations back to the bargaining tables. The union's roughly 48,000 members with GM will vote on the proposed deal through October 25th. So let's get into it here. The first one from the CNBC has reported. Let's see. Detroit. The United Auto Workers strike will continue through at least Friday as members vote on the union's tentative deal with General Motors, but there's no guarantee the work stoppage will end once the votes have been tallied. Membership approval of such a deal traditionally has been a sure thing. However, Fiat Chrysler workers 4 years ago voted down an initial leadership approval contract and sent negotiators back to the bargaining table. That's worrying both company executives and union leaders during this year's negotiations. If the proposal with GM is rejected, the union's roughly 48,000 workers would be expected to remain on the picket lines, adding to the automakers roughly $2 billion in losses over the work stoppage and increasing the financial burden on workers. The union won several financial gains for members, including annual lump sum bonuses or raises and a 11,000 ratification bonuses. But it also agreed to not block the company's plans to close 4 U.S. facilities, including 3 plants and a parts distribution center. Thousands of members of those affected facilities aren't likely to be too happy about the deal, adding to what's already expected to the continuous vote amid a federal investigation into union corruption and more than a month-long strike. So basically, links to this article, if you want to read into it, will be in the video description. So let's move on to the next story. UAW strike, day number 37. Tennessee workers vote down new contract with GM. This comes from the Detroit News. As more voting results trickle in from the United Workers locals, members at least at one local are showing their disapproval for the union's tentative agreement with General Motors. Local 1853 members at the Spring Hill manufacturing plant in Tennessee voted down the contract 51% to 49%, with skilled trades and production votes combined. According to unofficial results on the local's website, The skilled trade members alone approved the deal 55% to 45, while production members voted it down 51 to 49. Meanwhile, members of the Local 14 at GM's Toledo transmission plant approved the contract 80% to 20%, according to unofficial results on the local's website. Both skilled trades and production members overwhelmingly approved the contract. So it looks like the workers are tentatively want to get back to work and are agreeing to the tentative deal. So let's keep going down further. The 48,000 UAW members will continue to strike while they review details of the contract with GM and vote. Tuesday marks the 37th day of the strike, one of the longest in GM's histories. The new 4-year deal with GM promises to promote jobs for temporary employees and the elimination of a $12,000 gap on profit sharing. It also promises an $11,000 bonus if members ratify the contract, which would effectively more than offset the financial losses members took in the strike. Temporary workers would receive a bonus of $4,500 upon ratification. Members would also get a 3% base wage increase in the second and fourth years of the contract, and would pay 4% lump sum bonuses in the first and third years. But the agreement also allows GM to close 3 plants: Baltimore operations in Maryland, Lordstown Assembly in Northeast Ohio, and Warren Transmission in Southeast Michigan. So I think some of those workers may be upset. So if, or they'll probably be voting no if that would be my guess if they're planning on losing jobs, which, and also on next story on the tragic news from Detroit. UAW striker dies after being struck by a car on the picket lines at the Tennessee GM plant. A UAW member at the General Motors Spring Hill Assembly plant has died after being hit by a vehicle on the picket line Tuesday morning. Tragic loss hit the life of the worker himself and his co-workers. Let's see. A driver was crossing a bridge around 6 a.m. when it was still dark and struck the victim, who was transported to the hospital and pronounced dead. The driver who hit the victim was reportedly cooperating with investigators. The Columbus Police Department was investigating the incident, but provided no details to the Tennessee newspaper of Nashville. GM issued a statement after the accident saying, "We are deeply saddened to confirm an employee's death occurred this morning from a vehicle pedestrian accident on the public road near GM Spring Hill Assembly Plant South Entrance. We offer our thoughts and prayers to the employee's family and all who are impacted by the tragedy. General Motors is committed to employee safety, and plant leadership is working closely with authorities to investigate and understand what happened." Thoughts and prayers to the lost worker. That's never a fun thing. On to the next story. UAW continues strike. Despite a tentative agreement, Chevy Blazer production is impacted. The union will complete a vote on the tentative agreement on October 25th. This week makes a break or movement for the UAW strike. The union will vote either to ratify or strike down the tentative agreement. Both the automaker and the union agreed last week. In the meantime, union leadership has agreed to continue the strike, as it has so far lasted 36 days. Decision to keep the strike on has new victims. However, the Chevy Blazer Rutgers Reuters reported this weekend the automaker was forced to halt production as part shortages finally took their toll. It's the second time the UAW strike has brushed GM's Mexico production. The automaker previously confirmed the strike layoff thousands of Mexican workers and impacted transmission and pickup truck productions. Roadshow reached out to a GM for additional information, but the automaker did not immediately return the request. The decision to build the Chevy's midsize SUV in Mexico was one that was not only left a wound for the UAW union, but brushed said wound with salt. GM announced the Blazer would call Mexico home mere months after laying off the Lordstown, Ohio assembly plant's second shift. Last November, GM announced the Lordstown plant would go unallocated until it hashed out a new labor agreement with the UAW. Joining the Lordstown plant in the unallocated status is the Detroit Hamtramck production plant and two transmission production plants. The UAW GM tentative labor agreement officially closes Lordstown and the transmission plants, but keeps the Detroit plant online for the foreseeable future if it becomes the home of an electric pickup truck. Interesting. So it looks like GM's entering into the market of electric pickup trucks and may beat Tesla to the punch. Is it possible the UAW strikes workers will strike with Ford and FCA if they push the contract concessions? Let's read this argument here. No one is breathing easy yet because the new UAW strike and realm of possibilities in coming weeks, as General Motors waits to see whether the 46,000 factory workers will vote in the next few days to approve the tentative contract agreement with the UAW and end the strike, entering its sixth week. Labor experts and sources with knowledge of the negotiations say Ford Motor Company and Fiat Chrysler automobiles remain vulnerable to strike. So essentially, basically what they're saying here is Ford and FCA are waiting to see how the agreements goes with GM, and then they're going to rewrite their contracts or negotiations and see if the unions will accept it or not. So it's going to be a play. So since all of this stuff, let's take a look at the stock prices, because obviously that's going to affect business as well as everything else. Let's get here. GM, let's pull up. Currently, as of right now, live feed, GM stock is currently at $36.37. But at the start of the contract, it was at $37.21. As we can see here, it was on at the start of the strike, and hitting its all-time low here was at $33, and it's currently at $35. Well, give or take, or closed yesterday at $35. But now strike. Now, if we look at Ford, we have. Pull them up. Right now, they're sitting at $8.12, which is pretty bad. But looking at 6-month history, compared to GM, about the same time frame, they were at $8.89, and they had one time, I think their all-time low was at $7.79. Yeah, and currently they're at $8.12. So I think Ford would be really hurt if a strike goes on right now, were to hit them. And take a look at Fiat Chrysler. 6 month. Here at the same time when the GM strike started, they were at 13.77, and during that time their lowest they've hit is like 12.27, and currently they're at about obviously 13.21. So what do you guys think? You want to see the strike end? Do you have a vehicle that's stuck at a dealership right now because they're waiting on a part that they can't get from GM? Comment down below. Let's hear what you have to say, and let's hear about it. All right. Catch you next time.